So, very good afternoon to everyone watching us live from across the globe and from across different countries in the world. So, we welcome you to the webinar on anti-malarial drugs and human serum albumin interaction study organized by Association of Pharmaceutical Research in association of Biolix and Technoerit. So, without much delay, I would like to introduce our speaker for the afternoon, Shad Tayyab, sir, Professor of Biochemistry, Institute of Biological Sciences, University of Malaya, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Sir, we welcome you to the webinar, and I would like you to greet the audience and start your presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Assis, for inviting me to give this webinar on behalf of Association of Pharmaceutical Research, India. I also would like to thank Ms. Pooja, who has sent a kind invitation to present this webinar. I welcome you all for this webinar. May I have the first slide, please?
Sure, sir.
So this webinar is entitled Anti-Malarial Drugs and Human Serum Albumin. And since I am a biochemist, so it is from the biochemical perspective, the interaction study between these drugs and the human serum albumin protein. This work has been carried out by my PhD students and at the Institute of Biological Sciences, Faculty of Science, University of Malaya. On the left side, you will be having a little bit picture of, you may call, the entrance to the University of Malaya. On the right side, the picture of Institute of Biological Sciences, the corridor. Before I should start, you may call, the basic research, I would like to give you a brief introduction. That is, all of you must be familiar with malaria, which is caused by the bite of the female Anopheles mosquito. When the female Anopheles mosquito bites a host, you will be having several symptoms which can be visible. There are fever, headache, chills, nausea, and vomiting, muscle pain, and fatigue. And this map shows the countries with indigenous malaria cases. And here in the world map, you will see the red zones. Red zones where you'll be having the malaria cases you'll be having the maximum. And it covers usually the African continent, you'll be having South America, as well as India, you'll be having in Southeast Asia. To give you a background of malaria, that is one of the most infectious diseases in the world. About 93%, or around 213 million cases, are populated in African continent. This is according to the World Health Organization report of 2019. Malaria is caused by different species of Plasmodium parasites, namely Plasmodium falciparum, mostly affecting Africa and India. Plasmodium vivax affects mostly America, Southeast Asia. Plasmodium malariae, Sub-Saharan Africa and Southwest Pacific. Plasmodium ovale, relatively uncommon. Prevalence has been found around 3 to 5% only, and Plasmodium knowlesi, mostly found in Southeast Asia, including Malaysia. Out of these species, the most you may call infective species is Plasmodium falciparum. Life cycle of the Plasmodium parasites takes place in two hosts, man and mosquito. Man, where asexual life cycle starts, and sexual life cycle operates in mosquito. Now, when mosquito bites to the man, you will be having sporozoites are being entered or introduced, which are entering into the liver. There is another one cycle which we call liver cycle, and then from the liver, merozoites are being invaded into the red blood cells. So there is another cycle, that is the red blood cell cycle. So these are the two cycles which are being operative there within the human system. Then some of the merozoites are being converted into gametocytes, which are going to be taken up by the mosquito by another bite there, and where the sexual cycle starts. So this is just a brief idea all of you must be familiar with. Now I am coming to the therapy. Therapy involves the administration of the drugs either alone or in combination. Alone means use of the single drug, combination use of 2 or 3 drugs here. These are some of the drugs which are being used now for the treatment of malaria. Mefloquine, lumefantrine, acting in the same way, forms toxic drug heme complexes and leading to the death of merozoites. Pyrimethamine and sulfadoxine also having the same fate, that inhibits folate synthesis in the parasite. blocks parasite mitotic division, because all of you are familiar this folate synthesis required for the nucleotide biosynthesis, which is required for DNA replication. Therefore, it blocks the parasitic mitotic division. Primaquine blocks oxidative metabolism in parasite, affects glucose breakdown and energy production in parasite. Halopentrine forms cytotoxic complexes and parasite membrane damage, leading to the death of the parasite. Then antibiotic also, doxycycline, inhibits translation in the parasite, blocks protein biosynthesis in the parasite. Then artemisinin affects mitochondrial electron transport chain in the parasites, which affects the respiratory system in the parasite. Now, you can ask the question there that what is the importance of the drug plasma protein interaction? Drug plasma protein interaction is important to determine eventual activity and fate of drugs upon entering the circulation. Such interactions help to control, number one, the distribution of drug. Number two, rate of excretion of the drug from the body. Number three, toxicity of the drug. Number four, increasing drug solubility, because several drugs are not soluble under aqueous environment. So that upon binding to the protein, you will be having, they will be more soluble. And then lastly, increasing drugs half-life, which is very important, because upon binding to the protein, half-life is increased, and therefore lower doses of the drug are needed in to control. This cartoon tells you the same thing, that is pathway of the drug delivery, which is going through the oral drug ingestion, reaching to the red blood cell circulation, and then you will be having entering into the liver, target organs, or the kidneys. And here, if you look over, the blood capillaries, the drug is available either in the free form, you will be having the green dots, or in the protein bound form, which is the blue dots with the green. So this is a protein bound drug, and this is a free drug. Free drug is having the pharmacological effect as well as the clearance. There are many equilibria which are working on. For example, here you can have got blood or plasma. The drug is going to bond with the protein, the plasma protein, forming a drug protein complex. So this is a reversible reaction, that equilibrium. Now then, this drug is also going to enter into the target tissue, where it can form the receptor, so that you will be having drug receptor complex, and then you will be having the response. In the liver, the drug is going to be metabolized by the action of various enzymes and then excreted into urine or bile. And then in kidney, for the excretion after binding to the carrier, excretion into the urine system. Now, what is important here, that is competition between two drugs or the compounds for the same proteins. Let me say, if two drugs are going to bind to the same plasma protein, you will be having the possibility of drug-drug interaction, as well as very strong possibility of drug displacement. Assessment of drug protein binding in the blood is important part of the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion data. Same cartoon is talking about, because the same that is in the blood, you will be having plasma, the binding with the protein. This is the free drug, the protein drug complex. In the liver, metabolism, and then biliary excretion. In the target tissue, binding to the receptor, forming the drug receptor complex, you will be having pharmacologic response. And in the kidney, you will be having excretion. Human cerebrobubin, little bit introduction about, this is the major transport protein in the blood plasma or blood circulation. Functions as the major carrier protein for many molecules, and these molecules may be endogenous in nature as well as exogenous in nature. Endogenous, which are being produced inside the system, just like you may call bilirubin. Exogenous, you'll be having that which are coming from outside. Drugs are the part of these exogenous compounds. It is a protein with a molecular weight around 66.5 kilodalton. This is a helical protein, because 67% structure is helical structure, alpha helix. 17 disulfide bridges are present in this protein, responsible for the stability of the protein molecule. This is a monomeric protein comprised of 585 amino acid residues in a linear polypeptide chain, and this is non-glycosylated. This single polypeptide chain has been arranged in the form of 3 globular domains. That is what we call 3 homologous domain, because there is sequence homology in these 3 positions there. Domain 1 from 1 to 195 amino acid residue, domain 2 196 to 383 amino acid residues, and domain 3 384 to 585 amino acid residues. These are the globular domains which are interconnected with each other. These global domains are further divided into two subdomains, namely A and B. For example, you'll be having 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B. Two well-defined drug binding sites have been characterized on the albumin molecule. These sites have been known as Sudlow's site 1 and Sudlow's site 2. Sudlow's group actually have identified these sites. That's why they call Sudlow's site 1, Sudlow's site 2, or people also say site 1 and site 2. Besides these site 1 and site 2, there is another additional site 3, which we are not going to take over now. Site 1 is bigger, accommodates large and heterocyclic compounds with the negative charge at the center. And these are the molecules or the drug molecules which are established because to bind to site 1. Warfarin, phenylbutazone, indomethacin, and many more. And therefore, they are being used as a marker for site 1. Similarly, site 2 is a narrower shelter small molecules, mostly aromatic carboxylic acid with negative charge at one end away from the center. And these drug molecules are established to bind to site 2. Therefore, they are known as site 2 markers, diazepam, ketoprofen, ibuprofen, etc. This is the crystal structure of HSA just to show you the distribution of the domains and subdomains. So that domain 1 is red color, 1A, 1B is a little bit pinkish. Domain 2 is 2A green, 2B light green, domain 3 blue, 3B light blue there. Now you see because Sudlow site 1 is located there in subdomain 2A. Sudlow site 2 is located in subdomain 3A. And there is a third binding site, that is what we call site 3, which is located here in subdomain 1B. This is another picture of human serum albumin crystal structure taken from Guman, 2005. Again, showing a McCall here, that is site 1, which is located in subdomain 2A. And these are the markers which are being used, which are established to bind to site 1. Site 2, subdomain 3A, and then these are the molecules which are established to known, which are known you may call to bind to site 2, so that they can be used as site markers. The problem statement for this study was that is because we thought of information about the transport of anti-malarial drugs in human circulation is lacking. Since HSA is known to bind many ligands, both exogenous and endogenous in nature, it would be of interest to study the binding of anti-malarial drugs to human serum albumin. Therefore, the problem statement of the present research was, are anti-malarial drugs transported in blood through human serum albumin? That was the first question we asked. And then probability was that since it is a major carrier, the answer should be yes. So if yes, what are the binding characteristics? And number 2, that when drug binds, the second question we asked about, is there any effect of the drug binding on the protein conformation? Because if the protein conformation is being changed, the protein function will be affected. And then at the same time, the protein stability. Is there any effect of the drug binding on protein stability? Because this is also important. Otherwise, it will change the half-life of the protein as well. The anti-malarial drugs which we have selected for this study, mefloquine, we call MEF, which we are going to use the abbreviated forms in the further discussion. Lumefantrine, LUM, and pyrimethamine, PYR. These drugs are approved by FDA, Food and Drug Administration of US, currently in use to treat malaria. This shows you may call the chemical structures. These are you may call quinoline compounds, quinoline-related derivatives, mefloquine and lumefantrine. This is aminopyrimidine derivative, pyrimethamine. Objectives for this study were to characterize the interaction of anti-malarial drugs, mefloquine, lumefantrine, and pyrimethamine with HSA in terms of binding affinity, stoichiometry, and active forces involved. That is, what are the forces involved in the complex formation? Second, to study the effect of drug binding on the secondary and tertiary structures as well as microenvironmental changes around fluorophores. These are the aromatic fluorophores of human serum albumin. Third, to investigate the thermal stability of HSA in the presence of drug. And fourth, to predict the binding orientation of these drugs and locate the binding site on HSA. So probably in the next 20 minutes, we will try to give you the results which have been obtained by my PhD students. This slide shows little bit of a methodology there. That is, there are two parts: experimental parts, these are the wet experiments, and then computational parts, the dry lab, which is being carried out on the computer. In the experimental part, that is a drug and protein was taken, you may call incubated for a certain time period to achieve the equilibrium. And then we have determined the quenching mechanism and binding properties using the techniques of absorption spectroscopy and fluorescence spectroscopy. We have also determined binding thermodynamics and intermolecular forces in the complex formation using fluorescence spectroscopy. We determined the protein conformation and stability using 3D fluorescence spectroscopy as well as circular dichroism, CD spectroscopy. And competitive drug displacement experiments were carried out using fluorescence spectroscopy. On the other hand, computational methods were used, molecular docking using Autodock system. The computational part was carried out by my collaborator in his lab there, involving cluster analysis at sites 1 and 2 and binding orientation analysis. You will see a little bit later. These are the results for the fluorescence titration. So the experiment is simple, but then little bit tedious. You have to use, you may call, a particular concentration of albumin, that is HSA, and then that is what here 3 micromolar, and then you can keep on adding increasing concentration of the drug. So here on the blue one is the MEF HSA system, the orange one LUM HSA system, green one is PIRE HSA system. So the top spectrum number 1 is the fluorescence spectrum of the protein HSA, and it is having the emission maxima around 343 or 342 nanometer due to the presence of the tryptophan. Remember that HSA has got a single tryptophan, which is also located in subdomain 2A, which is site 1. Now, what happens that once you add, you may titrate the albumin with increasing concentration of the ligand, that is the drug molecule, you will be having the intensity, fluorescence intensity decreases. The magnitude of the decrease is different with different drugs there, depending upon how much concentration is being used. These titration experiments are carried out in PB phosphate buffer pH 7.4 at 298 K using lambda X, that is excitation wavelength of 295 nanometer. The purpose of using 295 nanometer lambda X is to excite only tryptophan residues. Otherwise, if people are using lambda X at 280 nanometer, both tyrosine and tryptophan will be excited. Here you will see, you may call, that the fluorescence spectrum is going to be changed, that is the fluorescence intensity is decreased. This process is known as fluorescence quenching. So that's why we say fluorescence quenching titration. And here, although this quenching is taking place due to several, you may call, processes, we are not going to discuss those processes. Alteration, here we say simple one thing: alteration in the fluorescence spectral signal is the indication of the interaction between the ligand and HSA. Ligand here is the drug molecule. Now, these titration data have been treated according to this equation, which is known as Stern-Walmer equation, where F0 and F, they are the fluorescence intensity value in the absence of the drug. F is in the presence of the drug. KSV is the Stern-Walmer constant. Q is the drug concentration. KQ is the biomolecular quenching rate constant. Tau is the average lifetime of the biomolecule. If you treat, you may call that titration data. One thing more, that this titration has been carried out at 3 different temperatures. So here we have shown the data only at 298 K. Although the titrations have been carried out at 3 different temperatures, and upon treatment following the Stern-Walmer equation, you will get the linear plots. These linear plots show, you may call, that the involvement of only one type of quenching. Before describing this, let me move to these slides to talk about, that is about the fluorescence quenching. There are 2 types of quenching actually. One is dynamic quenching, another one is static quenching. Dynamic quenching and static quenching can be differentiated based on, you may call, the temperature dependence of the KSV value, Stern-Walmer constant value. If there is a direct correlation between the temperature and KSV value, then we can predict that it is a dynamic quenching is involved. If there is an inverse correlation between temperature and KSV, inverse correlation means if you increase the temperature, KSV is decreasing, or if you decrease the temperature, KSV is increasing. That is inverse correlation. Then the indication of static quenching. And then there is another, you may call, information that if the value of the biomolecular quenching rate constant, that is KQ, is greater than 10 power 10 unit, you will be having indicator of static quenching. If there is a steady quenching, it means there is a ligand protein complex formation. So then we can go back here. That is, these are the three Stern-Warman plots obtained at three different temperatures. That is 288, 298, and 308 K. And you will find, you may call, that is the correlation coefficient very nice. Right here, you'll be having the value is 1. From the slope of these plots, you can get the values of the KSV, which I can show you in the next slides there. And these KSV values have been plotted here. You can see the inset. Now, here you'll find if you increase the temperature, KSV is increasing in the MAF-HSA system. So direct correlation, it means it looks like, you may call, involvement of dynamic quenching. On the other hand, if you'll be having, you may call, LUM-HSA and PYRE-HSA, you will be having here the inverse correlation. Means if you increase the temperature, you will be having the decrease in the Ka value. If you increase the temperature, there is a decrease in the Ka value. These values I will show you in the next slides actually. Before that one, that is in order to make out the judgment whether it is static quenching. Then there is another, so one parameter for talking about the static quenching is inverse correlation between the temperature and the KSV value, number 1. Means if you increase the temperature, you will be having the decrease in the KSV value. Another one is the KQ value. If the KQ value is higher than 10^10 unit, you will be having again indicator of static quenching. There is another indicator of static quenching, that if you take the absorption spectrum of the protein, UV absorption spectrum or UV visible absorption spectrum of the protein, and then if you add the drug molecules into it, increasing concentration of the drug, if the UV absorption spectrum changes, you may call, then again another indicator of static quenching involvement. So difference in the absorption spectrum, complex formation between the MAF, LUM, and HSA. So here we got, you may call, the three indicators based on our results there. Although there is another direct approach using, you may call, lifetime experiments to prove, you may call, whether it's static or dynamic quenching. But this is another strategy to find out whether it's static or dynamic, that find out the KS values and effect of temperature on the KS value. That is number 1. Number 2, find out the KQ values. And number 3, see the absorption spectra. Now, if you see the absorption spectra here, it has been found that the absorption spectrum of the protein is changing upon adding the drug molecules there. Although you'll be having the change is lower here, but then the concentration is also lower, up to 40 micromolar, compared to, in case of LUM, we have gone up to 160, and in PYRE, we have gone up to 260 micromolar. So these three, you may call, experiments, or these three probes, they are suggesting the form quenching induced by the drug as static quenching, which means the complex formation. I can take you here, this table. Now, these are on the first panel, you'll be having the temperature, 288, 298, 308. The first one is MAF-HSA system. Second one is LUM-HSA system. Third one is PYRE-HSA system. Now, the second column tells you about the KSV value. Now, you can see, you may call, if you increase the temperature, in case of MAF-HSA system, KSV also increasing from 3.53 to 5.17. So that is little bit indicator of the dynamic quenching, because direct correlation. However, in LUM-HSA and PYRE-HSA system, if you increase the temperature, the KSV value decreases 7.47 to 5.05, 3.54 to 1.53. So here for LUM-HSA and PYRE-HSA, since there is inverse correlation, if you increase the temperature, the KSV is decreasing. It means the direct, you can say that static quenching is involved. However, in case of MAF-HSA system, we found that KSV also increases with the increase in the temperature, thereby suggesting maybe the dynamic quenching. One thing more I can tell you, taking it to the Stern-Warman plots here. Since the plots are linear, it means that there is an involvement of only one type of quenching mechanism. Either it will be a dynamic or it will be, you may call it static. In many cases, you'll find the deviation from the linearity is observed. If the deviation is observed, you can say it is a mixed phenomenon involving both mechanism there, dynamic as well as static. So here, since it is linear, only one type of quenching mechanism is involved in the system, MEF HSA, LUM, and PIRE HSA system. Then we have also treated the titration data according to this equation. This is the double log equation to find out the association constant or the binding affinity. Association constant or the binding constant or the binding affinity. So Ka is the association constant, N is the stoichiometry of the binding, Lt and Pt are the total ligand and protein concentrations respectively. So since the experiment will carry out 3 temperatures, so that you will be having, these are the double log plots for MEF HSA, LUM HSA, and PIRE HSA system. Plots are linear. And from these plots, you can get the values of, you can determine the values of N as well as Ka. So double logarithmic plots for these system obtained at 3 different temperatures, and the values are given here. Now, before that one, from the KSV value, you can also calculate the KQ value. That is, KQ is the bimolecular quenching rate constant. So as I told you here, I have summarized the same thing again. That is, you have got the temperature, which is a variable, and then you have to determine the KSV value. If by increasing the temperature, if you are having the KSV is increasing, it means it is an indicator of the dynamic quenching. If by increasing the temperature, KSV is decreasing, it means it is the indicator of static quenching. So here we found in LUM and PIRE, based on the KSV, we call the changes, it is static quenching. However, in case of MEF, it is, you may call, the dynamic quenching, it looks like. On the other hand, what we have done, that when we determine the KQ value, when we calculated the KQ values have been found to be, in all cases, of the power of 10 to the power 12 unit. Now here you'll be having the rule of the game, that is, if the KQ value is higher than 10 power 10 unit, it means it is the indicator of static quenching. Therefore, here we got the suspicion that it is not dynamic quenching, but it is the static quenching here, also involved in the MEF HSA system. So once you'll be having static quenching involved, it means the ligand protein complex formation. So then we can go back again to see the verification of this, because our UV vis absorption spectra also suggests the same thing, because the absorption spectrum of the protein changes upon addition of MEF. Therefore, we say it is representative of the static quenching or the complex formation. Therefore, we got the 2 proofs to support that is in MEF HSA system, although KSV is increasing, there may be other factors for this increase, which I'm not going to discuss here, but you will be having from the KQ values as well as from the absorption spectra, we can say that there is also the involvement of static quenching in MEF HSA system. And once you say static quenching, it means ligand protein complex formation, number 1. So that whatever we have done in the titration experiment, that we found the quenching. So number 1, we say quenching was a static quenching. It means that ligand or drug protein complex formation takes place. Now coming to the double log plots, which we have used for determining the association constant values, we found here that is these values have been represented here in the column number 4. Now Ka values have been found to be of the order of 10 to the power 4 liters per mole. Okay, in all cases. Now, if the Ka value is falling in the order of 10 to the power 4, it means the binding affinity is intermediate or moderate binding affinity. Now, there are, you may call the affinity, binding affinity can be categorized into 3, that is strong binding affinity, intermediate binding affinity, and weak binding affinity. These binding affinities can be differentiated based on the Ka values. So for a strong binding affinity, the Ka value will be 10 to the power 7, 10 to the power 8. For weak binding affinity, 10 to the power 2. But if you are having 10 to the power 3 to 10 to the power 5, we say you may call moderate binding affinity. Now, out of the 3 binding affinities, which binding affinity is preferred for the drug carrier protein binding? The answer is moderate binding affinity. Why? Because the reason is that if the drug is going to bind to the carrier protein, whose function is to carry this drug to the target organ, then it is necessary that this carrier protein has to release this drug at the target site. If the affinity between the carrier protein and the drug is strong, it will be very difficult to get the release of the drug at the target site. Okay. Therefore, strong affinity is not desirable. On the other hand, if you see the affinity is weak, let me say K is 10 power 2, then you will be having that the free drug concentration will be more in the plasma. And therefore, this free drug concentration will be excreted out, again of no use. Therefore, it is desirable that the drug protein binding with the carrier protein should be of moderate binding affinity, which we found here. Okay. The last column shows about the value of N, which has been found to be 1, which is telling about the stoichiometry. It means referring to single binding site available in the protein for these drugs. Now, in order to find out when we have proved that is a complex formation is taking place between the drug and the protein, and this is the binding affinity, there is a one binding site, then the next question is, what are the forces which are responsible to make a complex between the protein and the drug? So what we did, that we have used, you may call the Van 't Hoff equation, because we got the values of Ka values at 3 different temperatures. We substitute these values, and then we got what we call the Van 't Hoff plot. So that you will be having here, that is from the Van 't Hoff plot of the 3 systems, you can determine the thermodynamic parameters, that is enthalpy change, delta H, entropy change, delta S. Entropy change, you can get it from the intercept value. Delta H, you can get enthalpy change, you can get it from the slope value. And then once you got, you may call the delta H and delta S, you can determine calculate the delta G, that is the free energy change for this reaction. These values have been placed, you may call, have been tabulated in this table. So MAF HSA system, the blue one, LUM HSA system, the orange one, and the PIRE HSA system is the green one. Now, what you can see here, this is a temperature. Delta H value has been found positive for the MAF HSA system, negative for the LUM and PIRE HSA system. Delta S value positive for all the 3 systems. Before understanding there how these thermodynamic parameters are telling you about the information about the forces, and then some other information, so you should keep this one in mind. Suppose if the delta H is positive, it means the reaction is endothermic. The binding reaction is endothermic in nature. Endothermic in nature means that if you increase the temperature, the affinity will increase. The association constant will increase. If delta H is negative, it means the reaction is exothermic. It means if the reaction is exothermic, if you increase the temperature, the binding constant will decrease. So now you can see for the MAF HSA system, delta H is positive, means it is endothermic reaction. So I can take you back, you may call, to this slide. That is here, you'll find if you increase the temperature, the Ka value is increased from 3.79 to 5.73. So increase in temperature, the Ka is increasing. Why? Because the reaction is endothermic. Okay. On the other hand, if you see the LUM and PIRE HSA systems, that is increased, since the reaction delta H is negative, reaction is exothermic. Therefore, here also you find that Ka is decreasing with the increase in temperature from 7.27 to 5.01, 3.33 to 1.32 unit there. So that is because of exothermic nature of the binding reaction. So that is number 1. Number 2, you will be having here the delta G value have been found to be negative in all cases. So if delta G is less than 0 or means negative, it is an indicator of that the reaction is spontaneous or reaction is feasible. Okay. Then according to Ross and Subramanian, the acting forces involved in the ligand protein complex formation can be predicted based on the thermodynamic parameters. How? According to Ross and Subramanian, that is, if the delta H and delta S, that is enthalpy change and entropy change, is positive, means greater than 0 means positive, then the indicator is that the involvement of hydrophobic interactions in ligand protein complex formation. Okay. On the other hand, you will be having, if delta H is less than 0 means negative, delta S is also negative, then the involvement of hydrogen bonds and van der Waals forces in the complex formation. The third category is if delta H is equal to 0, and delta is higher than 0, that is positive, then you can have the prediction as electrostatic interaction. Okay. Now you can apply, you may call these things. If you look over the MAF-HSA system, delta H is positive and delta S is positive. That means delta H is greater than 0 and delta S is greater than 0. It means a direct, you may call, a prediction of involvement of hydrophobic interactions in MAF-HSA complex formation. However, in both these systems, LUMA-HSA and PIRE-HSA system, they are not fulfilling any of these, you may call, requirement. That is, delta H should be negative, delta S should be negative. So delta H is negative, but the delta S is positive here. Here also negative and positive. Therefore, we cannot directly put, you may call, but we can predict, you may call, the involvement of hydrogen bonds and van der Waals forces based on the delta H value, which is negative. And then we can predict the involvement of hydrophobic interactions based on the delta S positive, delta S value. So that is how the predictions can be made. Now, after getting the story of the binding affinity, the binding site, and acting forces involved in the complex formation, the next question was, that is there any effect of the drug binding on the protein structure? Once we talk about the protein structure, so we are referring to secondary structures which are present in the protein as well as the tertiary structure. Secondary structure and tertiary structures can be, you may call, monitored or can be seen by the technique of CD spectroscopy. So this is far UV CD spectroscopy in the far UV region, that is 200 to 250 nanometer. So this is the far UV CD spectra, which will tell you about the secondary structures. Since human cerebroalbumin is a helical protein, it is giving, you may call, the two signals, that is two troughs at 208 around 222 nanometer, which is the characteristic feature of alpha helix. Okay. So upon adding, you may call, the drug at 1:1 and 2:1 molar ratio, then you will see slight change in these values there. So in some cases, the CD values decreased, in some cases, CD values is increased. But this is a minor change. Remember that all these experiments have been carried out at least 3 times. Therefore, you'll be having whatever the change which has been shown, this is, you may call, significant change. So it is not the experimental error. Now, since you'll be having the slight change occurring in the CD spectra, far UV CD spectra, it means that alpha helical structure has been changed. There is a little bit alteration in the secondary structure of the protein molecule. A bottom lane is telling you near UV CD spectra in the region, that is near UV region, 250 to 300 nanometer. And here you'll be having that near UV CD spectra of HSA is characterized by the two you may call signals to around 262 and 268. And then here again, you will find, you may call, the values of CD, they are either decreasing or increasing. And therefore, you can say slight change in the tertiary structure. That's why the net result here, that far UV CD spectral changes, they are referring to secondary structural changes of HSA upon drug binding. Near UV CD spectral changes also tells you about the tertiary structural changes of HSA upon the drug binding. Then the next question was, is there any alteration in the microenvironment around the fluorophores, that is the tryptophan and tyrosine? So we have used the 3-dimensional fluorescence spectroscopy. So at the top plane, so this is your MAF-HSA system, this is LUMA-HSA, this is PIRE-HSA system. In MAF-HSA, so the top one is showing the 3D fluorescence spectra and contour map of HSA. Here it is important to see that there are 2 peaks which are visible, although I have not given the table here. That is these peaks, one is, you may call, at having the lambda excitation wavelength around 230, another one is 280. And the emission maxima will be around 337, 338 for this peak one, the major peak, and here 332. Both these peaks are the representative of the protein fluorophores, that is tyrosine and tryptophan residues. Now what happens when we have added, so this is only pure protein, no drug. When we have added the drug, you can see the intensity is decreasing there. So this is a particular molar ratio, let me say 1:1 and 5:1. So you will be having, there is a quenching of the intensity of the fluorescence intensity of both the peaks. and therefore it is a representative of microenvironmental changes around tryptophan and tyrosine residues upon the drug binding. So that's another indication that why these changes are taking place around the protein fluorophores, that probably the drug is bound, you may call. Then the next question in the objectives, I told you that we talked about that is whether the drug binding is increasing or decreasing the thermal stability of the protein molecule. So we have determined the thermal stability by using fluorescence spectroscopy. Now what we did, that we have treated the protein in the different temperature, within the temperature range 298 to 353 K. Bottom one is there is a decrease in the fluorescence intensity upon increasing the temperature. It means that is a thermal denaturation is taking place. So in all cases, this is the free HSA. But then when we have used a complex, that is a drug protein complex, we found there is also the decrease upon increasing the temperature, that the thermal denaturation is there, but the decrease was relatively lesser. So relatively lesser decrease is an indication that probably the protein is relatively more stable compared to the protein alone upon binding to the drug. How? Because the drug, when it binds because of the protein molecule, so then there are actually, this is a very complicated explanation here, because the two equilibria they are working. Number one is the drug protein complex, and number two, it is the denaturation. So that, but here you can see that is in the presence of the drug, you will be having the thermal stability of the protein is increased. So that is what relative Fi value, fluorescence intensity values are increasing there in the presence of the drug. It means the thermal stability is increased. This is to identify the drug binding sites on HSA. As I told you that there are two main drug binding sites, site 1 and site 2, and site 3 is also known. So that, but we have done with site 1 and site 2, and then we found that it is the site 1 which is the final answer. So what we did, we have done the site marker displacement experiments. How? We have used the warfarin and phenylbutazone and indomethacin as site 1 marker. Now warfarin is having the advantage, that is warfarin is, you may call, a non-fluorescent molecule, but when it is bound to the protein, it becomes fluorescent. So what we did, we have used, you may call, 1:1 mixture of warfarin HSA, and then excited at 335 nanometer. So it is giving, you may call, the fluorescence spectra. So the top one is the fluorescence spectra of warfarin HSA complex, which is fluorescent. So this is around, you may call, emission maxima around 386 nanometer. Now, we have titrated this complex of warfarin HSA complex with increasing concentration of MEF or LUM and PIRE. So what is happening, that is, upon addition of the MEF, LUM or PIRE, in all cases, the fluorescence intensity of the warfarin HSA complex is decreasing. Although the magnitude is different with different drugs here, but there is a decrease here, very significant decrease. That decrease shows, you may call, that probably, that why there is a decrease? Probably warfarin is being displaced by the added drug, the either MEF or LUM or PIRE. Now, if you ask the question that why there is a decrease or how the warfarin is being displaced, there may be two possibilities. Either these drug molecules are going to bind to the same site where the warfarin is sitting, or it can also displace through allosterically. So here we are taking the first assumption that probably the drug is going to bind to the same site, that is site 1, because warfarin is the marker for site 1. Okay. In order to prove this one, so what we have done another experiment using another site 1 marker and site 2 marker. Site 1 marker, here we have used a phenylbutazone, here in this case indomethacin, and here phenylbutazone, PBZ. And then we have used the site 2 marker, diazepam, and ketoprofen. Now, here what we have done, we have treated the protein molecule so that the empty circles, that is the bottom curve that shows, you may call, the free HSA or HSA alone. So that once you are treating with the increasing concentration of the drug, MEF, LUM or PIRE, there is a decrease in the fluorescence intensity there. Okay. Then when we have used, you may call, diazepam, or you'll be having the ketoprofen, which are the site 2 markers, we could not find any significant change in the intensity, fluorescence intensity, when is compared to the HSA alone. So here you'll be having more or less the same. So the second curve is you may call with the diazepam HSA complex. Okay. When you will be having such, so now when you have used the diazepam or ketoprofen HSA complex, it means we have blocked site 2 because site 2 is already engaged with diazepam or ketoprofen. Okay. Then if you'll be having the drug is going to bind to site 2, it means that diazepam, in the presence of diazepam, the curve should be lifted up. However, we found a similar binding pattern of these drugs when the site 2 was engaged with diazepam or ketoprofen. It means that probably the drug is not going to bind to site 2. But in case of phenylbutazone drug complex or indomethacin drug complex, which are the site 1 marker, we found the changes are lesser there. Why? Because since phenylbutazone is already sitting on site 1 or indomethacin is already sitting on site 1, so the drug is not able to produce that much coenzyme which it is going to produce in the absence of any site marker. So that is again the verification of the warfarin results, that is probably the drug is going to bind to site 1. Okay. So that's why we say here site 1 as the preferred binding site. This is the dry experiments on the computer. That is here the molecular docking, that is cluster analysis. I can tell you in brief that is what is happening here. That is a total of 100 runs were made for each binding site. So red symbols are showing for site 1 and blue one for site 2. Here you will find the red symbols. So here it is the mean binding energy. If the mean binding energy is more negative, it means the system is more stable. So you will find that when the drug is going to bind to site 1, the energy produced is more negative. It means the system is more stable compared to when it binds to site 2, the blue one. Therefore, the docking results also suggest that site 1 is the preferred binding site for the MEF. And then they have done the orientation analysis and the Lick plot analysis to show, you may call, what are the surrounding residues. And here you can see that surrounding residues are, the majority of the residues are hydrophobic in nature around mefloquine, and thereby supporting hydrophobic interactions between the mefloquine and the protein. And then, as I told you, that when the complex is formed, it is not necessary that it is involving only one particular force to stabilize the complex. One force will be the major force, but you will be having the second support is coming from other forces. So here you'll be having the 2 hydrogen bars are also formed between the MEF and the tyrosine 150 and arginine 297 of albumin. This is the same docking results for you may call the LUM. Here also you'll be having the blue one. You can see here, although number of conformations is lesser, but then the free energy, you will be having mean binding energy is more negative, means more stable. And this is again the Lick plot distribution, talking about the surrounding residues. Same thing we have done for the PIRE. Also, you can have site 1, the more negative energy, more stable system compared to site 2. And therefore, this Lick plot talking about, you may call, the distribution of the residues. This is the same summary of, you may call, orientation analysis, telling you about, you may call, how the drug is going to bind to site 2, site 1, that is subdomain 2A, and then hydrogen bonding pattern. And to sum up the conclusions, here we say MEF, LUM, and PIRE induce fluorescence quenching of HSA, and that quenching is characterized as static quenching. It means there is a drug-protein complex formation. There is a moderate binding affinity between drug and HSA in all systems, which is preferred actually for the efficient transfer of the drug from the carrier protein to the target site. The complexes were stabilized by hydrogen bonds, hydrophobic interactions, and van der Waals interactions. Electrostatic interactions are not involved. Small changes in the secondary and tertiary structures of HSA recorded upon MEF, LUM, and PIRE binding, as well as microenvironmental perturbation around tyrosine and tryptophan residues of HSA upon drug binding. Although the drug binding is going to make small changes in the secondary and tertiary structures of the protein, but then it is improving the stability of the protein molecule upon binding. The favored binding site of these 3 drugs was found to be located on HSA as site 1. These are the references which I have given you, in our slides there, which we have used. All these, you may call, work has been published in these 3 journals there. Journal of Molecular Liquids. So this is your pyrimethamine to this year. This one on lumefantrine in Journal of Biomolecular Structure and Dynamics. It is available online. Maybe it has not got the volume number, maybe 2021. And then combination mode of anti-malaria drug mefloquine, we published in Biopolymers 2019. And then in this issue, the editor has selected our picture of our paper on the front cover of the page of the journal. And lastly, I would try to acknowledge my student, Kabiru Abubakar Musa. He is a Nigerian student at the verge of submission of your PhD. Since he came from Nigeria, that's why our interest oriented towards we call anti-malarial drugs. Dr. Sharuddin Muhammad, who is presently the head of Institute of Biological Sciences, he is the person involved in the bioinformatics analysis or the docking and computational methods. I would like to acknowledge the grant which I received from the faculty, that is faculty research grant with this number. I also acknowledge the facilities provided by Institute of Biological Sciences, Faculty of Science, University of Malaya. And I would like to thank you for your patience hearing. Thank you very much. If there are questions, I am ready to answer.
Thank you so much, sir, for this beautiful presentation. I think we have received a lot of comments, but I don't see any questions, sir. Everybody has commented that it was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much for the informative session and everything. Nobody has commented any questions, sir. And we are also about to end our time as well for the webinar. So before we end this, I would like to inform all the participants that everybody will receive an email with the links for downloading the certificates, as well as the link for sending your feedbacks regarding the webinar as well. So nobody needs to panic about how they are going to get the certificates and the feedback links. I see a lot of people asking for feedback links. So everybody will receive an email shortly in the mailbox with feedback link as well as the certificate download link as well. So before we end this, I would like to again thank our Saad Tayyib sir for this beautiful and informative presentation. And
I would like to add one thing there, that if anybody is having any query, that you can talk to me through the email. You can send an email if anything is not clear related to this. Sure. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, sir. And before we end this, I would again like to say everyone that everybody will receive this email for both your certificates and the feedback links. So before we end this, we'd like to thank Saad Tayyib sir again for this beautiful presentation.
Thank you very much.
Like to thank all the audiences for their patient hearing. And we assure everyone that we'll come up with more interesting webinars in the short future as well. Every week we're conducting webinars, so you can follow our pages for more webinars that you can come and attend here. So before we end this, we'd like to urge everyone to stay safe during this pandemic time, as we know what the situation is worldwide. So we'd urge everyone to stay safe and go out unless and until it's not necessary not to go out. So thank you from our side. Till the next time, goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.